Hi, everyone. So I wanted to do a couple of these translations with you. I give you the answers elsewhere or a set of possible answers, but I kind of wanted to just show you my reasoning process here. So as I'm going through these, I typically isolate the logical indicator words. For example, either or right here is an important one. And then after that, I'm able to more easily conceive of what is being connected here. So for example, in this case, I know that either or is the fundamental structure of this sentence. So I go ahead and write my wedge. Then I'm able to pick um, sentence constants for those propositions on both sides of that wedge. So for this one, why don't we go ahead and use S? That makes sense to me. And for this one, well, we can use J, right? Now, if you don't pick S and J in this particular case, that's okay. What really matters here is that you're understanding the underlying logical structure. So if you end up writing instead of that, let's just say you wrote S or G, right, for singer or guitar player, that's fine. I can still recognize the underlying logical structure. So as long as you're able to answer something like that's fine, right? So, okay. Let's go down to, well, just so you can see, and is a logical indicator word here. If, then is are the logical indicator words there. This one's kind of an obvious one, if and only if. So for each of these, I essentially right away know, oh, that's an and statement or a conjunction. That's a horseshoe, that's a triple bar. So that's kind of the way I organize or how I begin to write things down here. So let's skip down here. This is how I would do this one, number 9. I know that I have one logical indicator word here, if. So if typically entails a then, right? If this, then this. There is no then though, right? It's missing there, but it's an implied then. You know that is what's being said. If this happens, then this will happen. So either way, I know for number 9, I'm still going to need a horseshoe. And basically what's going on here is there is this sentence, this proposition, and then this proposition. I know that if this is the case, Lisa making martinis, then this would be the case. Sarah will make chicken pot pie. So something like that is the case. So you have to watch out for that. In some cases, the one logical indicator word is implied. One other case you have to watch out for eventually is this, but is actually the same as or gets transposed as the ampersand, right? So another thing to watch out for. Okay, let's take a look now here at the main operators. These are pretty important. Eventually, you're going to be so good at these that you won't even really, you know, basically won't even wince. You'll be like, all right, I got this. But let me just show you kind of how the scope works in each of these. So for the wedge there, it applies to two things. That's the kind of operator that a wedge is. It applies to whatever is immediately to its left and immediately to its right. So to its left, it has an O, to its right, it has an I. So the scope of this here wedge is just those three things, the O, the wedge, and the I. Always, the operator is always included in its own scope. So there's three things in this particular um, little fragment. Now let's go for the triple bar. That's the next one. That's if we're going from smallest scoped operators to biggest, that's the next one that applies to the H and the P. Again, that one's kind of a small one. H, triple bar, P are the only things that triple bar applies to. By the way, we're including the grouping indicators with it. They're kind of just part of the, par for the course. Okay, blue for this one now. This horseshoe is a little harder to see what it applies to. In fact, maybe I should get rid of some things here so you can kind of see what it really is applying to. We know that it applies to whatever's to its left and to the right. To the left, it actually has a grouping indicator, which means that to the left, it applies to this whole thing in parentheses. To the right, same thing, another grouping indicator, which means it applies to this whole thing in parentheses. So the scope of that horseshoe is a little bit bigger than the other two that we've seen, but it is not quite the largest scope, and so it is not the main operator. The main operator, it turns out, is this here tilde, because it applies to whatever is immediately to its right. By the way, it happens to be a grouping indicator, which means it applies to literally the rest of this sentence, which means that tilde applies to itself and the rest of the sentence, meaning it has the biggest scope, which means that is the main operator. So if you're doing this problem, all you would have to do is circle the biggest, the main operator. So there you go. Okay, let's do two more of these, and then I'll let you do the rest on your own. Okay, so let's start with the tilde here. That's a pretty small scope. It only applies to itself and the U. Same thing with this tilde, itself and the I. Definitely not the whole sentence, right? Okay, let's keep moving along here. Now the ampersand. Well, that applies to what's to its left, which is the U, but the U, by the way, is connected to the tilde. So that applies to the tilde and the U. And to the right, it applies to the tilde, which, by the way, also applies to the I. So that there ampersand basically applies to everything to its left and everything to its right. So that is the main operator in that one. And as such, we'll go ahead and circle it like the main operator. Okay, let's do one more here. That one's kind of a fun one, so I'll let you work on that one. Let's jump down to number 6. Why not? So you can see the reasoning process here. Okay, well, let's see. Let's start in here. That tilde applies to whatever's to its right, which is that tilde, which by the way applies to 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 this O right here. So, which is the main operator there? Well, if we work backwards, it's actually easier to see. Let's go with yellow here. This tilde only applies to itself and this O. So it's only two things. This tilde applies to itself and the tilde next to it, which is three things. This tilde applies to four things, this to 5, this to 6. And of course, that means that this first tilde applies to everything to the right of it, which means that's the main operator. So that's how you kind of do those. Okay, hopefully that helps.